Commander Jixel's secondary heart stopped beating as the tactical display updated. Mission Blackstone failure probability now stood at 99.8%, and the juvenile strike team was refusing deployment. "Repeat that," Jixel growled into the comm, claws scraping against the command console. "Sir, the Cubs won't board the transport." Instructor Zinka's voice carried an edge of panic that 3 decades of military service shouldn't allow. "They're insisting on bringing their lunch containers." The words hung in the air like a spatial anomaly. For 3 cycles, the Galactic Council had thrown their finest warriors at Mission Blackstone. Elite commandos from 8 species, special operations units that had toppled governments and dismantled criminal empires. Every single team had failed to breach the ancient facility's defense grid on that abandoned moon, their genetic signatures rejected by security protocols older than most current civilizations. The Kix and Cubs represented the Council's final option. Juvenile warriors, yes, but these weren't ordinary children. They'd been training since they could walk, their young genetics still malleable enough that the Council's xenobiologists believed they might trick the ancient sensors. The facility supposedly contained weapons technology that could end the current interstellar war consuming 6 sectors. The activation window, tied to some astronomical alignment the Council's best scientists barely understood, would close in 6 hours. 6 hours to accomplish what 3 cycles of attempts had failed to achieve. And the Cubs wanted their lunchboxes. "There's more, Commander." Zinka's voice dropped lower. "They're demanding the human come with them." Jixel's third eyelid flickered involuntarily. "The civilian consultant? The nutrition coordinator?" "Yes, sir. They refused to deploy without her." This couldn't be happening. The human female had been hired 8 planetary rotations ago to improve combat rations for juvenile trainees. A basic support role that somehow escalated when the Kix and Cubs started performing better in simulations. Their test scores improved. Their response times sharpened. The military psychologists attributed it to better nutrition, filed their reports, and considered the matter resolved. Now those same Cubs, the Galactic Council's last hope for Mission Blackstone, were holding a critical deployment hostage over meal schedules and a human cafeteria manager. "Get her to the command center, now." Jixel pulled up the mission timeline. 5 hours and 53 minutes until the window closed. "And someone explained to me why our most critical military operation in a generation depends on lunchboxes." The tactical display pulsed red. Every previous mission attempt was documented there. Genetic authentication failures, defense grid activations, automated countermeasures that had sent elite warriors fleeing back to their ships. 16 teams, 0 successes. The facility's security system rejected every known species in the galactic database. Jixel watched the Cubs on the hangar bay surveillance feed. 12 juvenile Kixan warriors, each barely reaching maturity by their species standards, each trained since birth for combat operations. They sat in perfect formation near the transport ship, their combat gear checked and ready. Next to each of them sat a small container with their name written on it in neat human script. The commander's comm chirped. "Sir, the human is on her way up. She says the Cubs haven't eaten their mid-cycle meal yet, and she needs to—" "I don't care what she needs to do," Jixel snapped. "We have 5 hours and 50 minutes to save 6 sectors from total war, and apparently that requires lunch coordination." The words sounded insane even as Jixel spoke them, but the failure probability remained at 99.8%. The Cubs wouldn't deploy, and somewhere on that abandoned moon, an ancient facility sat waiting with secrets that could change everything. Bella arrived at the command center carrying 3 insulated bags and looking completely unbothered by the chaos erupting around her. "You wanted to see me, Commander?" She set the bags down on a tactical planning table that currently displayed invasion routes for 6 star systems. "I've got the Cubs' lunch ready, but we're running behind schedule. They get cranky if we miss the midday window." Jixel stared at the human female. She wore civilian clothes, her hair pulled back in a practical style, and she was discussing meal schedules while the fate of sectors hung in the balance. "Explain to me why 12 trained warriors refused to deploy on the most critical mission in 3 cycles without your presence." Oh, that. Bella started unpacking containers, each labeled with a cub's name. Well, they're kids, Commander. Really well trained, incredibly disciplined kids, but still kids. And kids need structure, especially when they're stressed. They're elite combat operatives, Zinka interjected from across the command center. Bella looked up, one eyebrow raised. They're 15 cycles old. Their brains are still developing. You've had them training nonstop for this mission, which means their stress hormones are elevated, their sleep patterns are disrupted, and… She held up a container. They haven't had a decent meal in 3 planetary rotations according to their logs. They receive optimal nutrient paste formulated specifically for keeping them alive, not keeping them functioning at peak performance. Bella's voice carried the same matter-of-fact tone she might use explaining why vegetables were important. Look, I used to manage food services for 3 schools back on Earth. You know what happens when you send kids into high-pressure situations on empty stomachs or artificial nutrition. They crash. Hard. The command center had gone quiet. Senior military officers stood frozen, watching a civilian debate combat readiness based on lunch menus. Jixel's comm erupted with an incoming transmission. Commander, this is Admiral Kixon. I'm monitoring your situation. Please tell me our final mission attempt isn't being delayed because of meal service. Admiral, the Cubs refused to board without… I heard. The Admiral's voice could have cut through hull plating. This violates every military protocol we have. We don't accommodate personal requests during critical operations. Bella chuckled, actually laughed, while an admiral threatened disciplinary action. With respect, Admiral, have you tried asking them when they last ate something that wasn't nutrient-paced? Or when they last slept more than 4 hours? Or when anyone treated them like they were people instead of weapons? The silence that followed felt dense enough to create its own gravity well. The Cubs' performance scores increased by 340% after I started coordinating their nutrition. Bella continued, calmly labeling another container. Their reaction times improved. Their decision-making got sharper. Their emotional regulation stabilized. You want to know why they won't deploy without me? She looked directly at the surveillance feed showing the waiting Cubs. Because I'm the only person in this entire military complex who remembers their children. Jixel pulled up the Cubs' recent performance data. The metrics were undeniable. Every measurable combat indicator had improved dramatically since the humans' arrival. Skills that should have taken cycles to develop had manifested in weeks. Commander, we have 5 hours and 38 minutes, the Admiral said quietly. If bringing the human achieves mission success, then protocols can adapt. Get everyone on that transport. Bella was already sealing the last lunch container. I'll need to bring extra snacks. Growing cooks and metabolisms burn through calories fast, and if this facility is as big as your scans suggest, they'll need sustained energy for… Just get on the ship, Jixel interrupted, watching the mission clock count down. And explain to me how lunchboxes are going to breach a defense system that's rejected 16 elite military teams. Bella smiled, picking up her bags. Commander, I have no idea how we're getting into that facility. But I guarantee those Cubs will perform better on full stomachs than empty ones. She walked toward the hangar bay, leaving a command center full of military officers staring at tactical displays that suddenly seemed less important than meal schedules. The transport ship's interior presented a scene that would have baffled military historians. 12 juvenile warriors performing complex weapon calibrations while eating sandwiches. Bella moved between them, checking that each Cub had opened their lunch container, occasionally reminding one to drink water or another to pace themselves. Jixon, you're eating too fast. You'll get indigestion before we land. Yes, Bella, the young warrior replied, slowing down obediently while adjusting the power settings on equipment that could level a building. Jixel watched from the cockpit access, trying to reconcile what logic dictated should be impossible. The Cubs' movements were fluid, professional, deadly precise, between bites of food, while the human moved among them like she was supervising a school field trip instead of the most critical military operation in 3 cycles. Approaching the facility, the pilot announced. Defense grid activating. All teams, Prepare for genetic authentication protocols. The display lit up with data from previous attempts. 16 elite teams, their approach vectors mapped in red. Every single one had triggered the facility's automated defenses at the genetic scanning checkpoint. The ancient security system would analyze biological signatures, find them lacking whatever criteria it demanded, and activate countermeasures that sent even the most hardened warriors retreating. "Cubs, landing in 90 seconds, Bella called out, collecting empty containers. "Remember, if you start feeling anxious, use the breathing techniques we practiced." "Breathing techniques?" Zinka muttered from his seat. "We're breaching a facility that's has scared off," Bella corrected. "The defense grid is non-lethal according to your scans. It just makes people really want to leave, which means it's probably triggering fear responses, which means proper breathing helps manage the physiological reaction, which means..." The ship shuddered as they entered the facility's scanning range. Jixel's console erupted with warnings. "Genetic authentication beginning. All personnel, maintain current positions." The Cubs stood, forming up in perfect tactical formation. Bella stood with them, still holding her bag of extra snacks, looking completely out of place among warriors bred for combat. Blue light swept through the transport bay. The genetic scanner, technology older than most species' space programs, analyzing everyone aboard. Jixel watched the readout, expecting the familiar rejection sequence that had turned back every previous attempt. The light paused on the Cubs. Scanning, processing, then it swept across Bella. The entire defense grid powered down. "What?" Jixel stared at the display. "What just happened?" "Sir, the facility's main entrance is opening," the pilot reported, voice tight with disbelief. "No countermeasures, no defensive protocols. It's just letting us in." "Run that scan again," Jixel ordered. Something malfunctioned. The second scan produced the same result. But this time, text appeared on the display, rendered in a language so ancient the ship's computer needed 3 seconds to translate it. Genetic override recognized Apex Caregiver Protocol. Access granted. "Welcome, Guardian." The Cubs looked at each other, then at Bella. She blinked. "Huh, that's new." Jixel pulled up the genetic analysis. The scanner had processed the Cubs' signatures, found them adequate but insufficient. Then it had detected Bella's presence among them, analyzed her biological markers, and made a decision that overrode 3 cycles of rejections. "The facility isn't looking for warriors," Jixel said slowly, understanding crystallizing like ice in vacuum. "It's looking for caretakers." "Sir, we're getting readings from inside," the sensor officer called. "The facility's internal structure. Commander, this isn't a weapons depot. It's a development center. Educational facilities, growth chambers, nursery spaces." Bella laughed, the sound bright and utterly incongruous with the moment. "So the most dangerous mission in 3 cycles needed someone who knows how to take care of kids." "Lunch coordinator, actually," Jixel corrected automatically, his own words from earlier coming back to him. "Even better." Bella shouldered her bag of snacks. "Come on, Cubs, let's go see what's inside. And remember, we stay together, we communicate clearly, and if anyone needs a break, we take one. Just like we practiced." The Cubs followed her down the ramp, 12 trained warriors taking orders from a human who packed lunches. The facility that had rejected 16 elite military teams opened for them like they were coming home. The facility's interior defied every tactical brief Jixel had studied. Where intelligence reports promised weapons storage, there were chambers filled with soft surfaces and adjustable lighting. Where scouts had detected power signatures matching destruction-class armaments, there were devices that hummed with gentle energy, displaying interactive learning interfaces. Where the Council expected arsenal vaults, they found rooms designed for rest, for growth, for learning. "This is just a really fancy school," Bella said, walking through a chamber that analysis had labeled Critical Weapons System. She touched a panel, and it lit up with what was clearly an educational program, translated into 15 languages. "Look at this. adaptive learning modules, developmental tracking, emotional regulation tools. One of the cubs, Dynex, approached what intelligence had classified as a planet-killer device. It activated at his touch, projecting a holographic display that began teaching advanced mathematics through interactive problem-solving. The cub sat down, instinctively engaging with the lesson while finishing the last of his lunch. "Commander, we're detecting massive power draws throughout the facility," the sensor officer reported. "Every system is coming online. It's like the entire complex is waking up." Because it was. Bella moved through the spaces with the same casual confidence she showed in the cub's training facility, understanding the purpose of each room at a glance. A chamber full of weapons-grade technology was actually a space for physical development, equipment that adapted to each user's needs, teaching combat skills while preventing injury. Another room contained dangerous energy sources that turned out to be growth acceleration pods designed to speed healing and development without the trauma of forced maturation. "The ancient species that built this place," Jixel said quietly, watching Bella guide two cubs toward what his scanner insisted was a tactical command center, but looked suspiciously like a library. "They weren't building weapons. They were building something more powerful," Bella replied, helping a cub access a learning station. "They were building better people. Look at this setup. Everything here is designed to accelerate learning while maintaining emotional health. Skills without trauma, strength without brutality, knowledge without stress." A central AI interface activated, its surface covered in symbols that the ship's computer took longer to translate. When the words finally appeared, they reshaped everything the Council thought they knew. "Welcome to the Generational Victory Complex. A civilization's strength lies not in its weapons, but in how it raises its young. Here, children learn without fear. Here, they grow without breaking. Here, they become what their potential allows, not what desperation demands." Jixel felt something shift in his understanding of galactic history. They won wars by raising better-adjusted generations. Not just wars. Bella was reading the facility's documentation, her expression growing more amazed by the moment. According to this, the species that built this place didn't just win conflicts, they made them obsolete. Their young grew up so capable, so emotionally stable, so well-educated that other civilizations couldn't compete. Within 3 generations, they became the dominant culture not through conquest, but through excellence. The cubs were scattered throughout the facility now, each engaging with different learning systems. Jixel watched as technology older than his species taught them advanced tactics, scientific principles, and diplomatic strategies. But unlike traditional military training, the systems incorporated breaks, encouraged questions, and adapted to each cub's emotional state. "Why would they abandon this?" Zinka asked, staring at displays showing educational outcomes that exceeded anything current galactic civilization could achieve. "They didn't abandon it," Bella said, touching another interface. "They graduated from it. Look, the facility has a decommission date. They used it for exactly as long as they needed it, then moved on. Left it here in case." She paused, reading further. "In case younger species needed to learn the same lessons." The facility AI spoke directly to Bella, its voice warm and almost parental. Caregiver recognized. "You understand what others forgot. That strength begins with care, that wisdom starts with patience, that victory grows from ensuring each generation surpasses the last. Full access granted." Throughout the complex, systems activated that Council intelligence hadn't even detected. Not weapons. Tools for learning, resources for growth, technology for building civilizations instead of destroying them. Jixel contacted the Admiral. "Sir, Mission Blackstone is complete, but it's not what we thought." "Did you secure the weapons?" "There are no weapons, Admiral. Just the most advanced educational system ever created. And proof that the war we're fighting." Jixel watched a cub master a concept in minutes that should take months. "We're fighting it wrong." Bella handed out the snacks she'd brought, moving between cubs who were learning at impossible speeds, checking that they stayed hydrated and took mental breaks. The most powerful facility in known space had granted her complete control, because she'd remembered what civilizations forgot: that children needed care, not just training; that the future was built in how you raise the young; that the real impossible mission wasn't breaching security. It was remembering how to be human. The Galactic Council's emergency session had been running for 8 hours, and nobody could agree on how to document what had happened. "Let me understand this correctly," Council Representative Nick Saul said, reviewing the mission reports for the 5th time. 16 elite military teams failed to breach the facility. 12 juveniles and a human nutrition coordinator succeeded, because she packs lunches. Because she understands childhood development, Admiral Kixon corrected, though his voice carried the same bewilderment. The facility's security wasn't looking for warriors. It was looking for someone who knew how to care for young ones. The data was undeniable. The Cubs' performance metrics had increased by 340% since Bella implemented structured meal schedules and proper nutrition. Now, with access to the ancient facility's educational technology, those same Cubs were mastering skills that took adult warriors cycles to learn. Between scheduled snack breaks. The facility's AI has agreed to share its educational protocols, Jixel reported to the Council. But it will only work with programs that meet specific welfare standards for juvenile trainees. No forced development, no trauma-based conditioning, no extended periods without proper rest and nutrition. Military strategists across 6 sectors were having simultaneous breakdowns. Centuries of established training doctrine, refined through countless conflicts, had been rendered obsolete by a human who understood that growing brains needed regular meals and adequate sleep. "I'm implementing new protocols across all Kixon youth training facilities," the Admiral announced. "Mandatory caregiver consultants, structured meal schedules, developmental oversight. If this is what produces superior warriors, then we adapt." 3 other species' military representatives immediately requested similar programs. Bella's official title became Chief Child Development Officer for Galactic Military Youth Programs, though she still introduced herself as a lunch coordinator. Her office overlooked the main training facility, where Cubs now cycled through advanced combat simulations, educational modules from the ancient facility, and scheduled meal breaks that had become as important as weapons training. "The ancient species had it right," Jixel said, watching Bella organize next week's menus while military commanders stood around her desk taking notes. "A well-fed, emotionally stable warrior is worth 10 desperate ones." "More than that," Bella replied, marking dietary requirements for 3 different species. They understood that if you want a civilization that lasts, you invest in childhood. Not just training, actual development. These Cubs aren't just learning to fight. They're learning to think, to adapt, to solve problems, because someone finally gave them the space and support to do it. In the training facility below, Cubs were mastering techniques that had taken previous generation cycles to learn. They moved through complex tactical scenarios, then broke for snacks. They absorbed lessons from technology thousands of cycles old, then played games that taught teamwork. They became exceptional not despite their age, but because someone finally treated their age as an asset instead of an obstacle. The facility's educational technology was being integrated into military academies across 8 sectors. But the technology was useless without the philosophy. That strength began with care, that excellence required patience, that victory was built one well-supported generation at a time. Bella looked at the official mission designation still displayed on her desk terminal. "Mission Blackstone? Impossible?" She laughed, the sound carrying through her office. "Should have just called it Field Trip Day and saved everyone some time." Jixel, standing nearby reviewing integration schedules, actually smiled. The Council is still trying to explain in their reports how a lunch coordinator accomplished what elite military teams couldn't. That's because they're thinking about it wrong. Bella closed her menu planning and looked at the Cubs training below. They keep calling it an impossible mission, but there was nothing impossible about it. You just needed someone who remembered that kids, no matter how well trained, no matter what species, are still kids. And kids need someone who cares about them, not just what they can do. The cosmos was learning what Earth had understood for generations, that the future wasn't built with weapons, but with care. That the strongest civilizations weren't the ones with the most powerful militaries, but the ones that raised their young with wisdom and patience. That sometimes the most critical military asset wasn't a warrior at all. It was someone who knew when to pack extra snacks. Across the galaxy, training protocols were changing. Youth programs were reforming. Military doctrine was adapting to include words like developmental needs and emotional regulation and structured meal times, all because a human cafeteria manager remembered that lunchboxes mattered. The cubs would grow up to be extraordinary, not because someone broke them and rebuilt them as warriors, but because someone fed them, rested them, taught them, and cared about them as people first. Mission Blackstone. Impossible, indeed. Bella went back to planning meals, while the military complex around her slowly learned what she'd always known, that the impossible becomes possible when you remember to pack lunch.